1 week season.
Hello, friends and Inner Circle fam. Welcome to the Week 12 edition of the OWS roster review stream. I'm your host, StatATL. I've got a bunch of subscriber rosters to review today, so let's hop in. First roster comes from Help Maia. It's a $3.20 max in the 400,000 entrant play action. This one is a CJ Stroud double stack with Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. I do like going double stacks with expensive QBs, unless it's one of the multi-touchdown rushing upside guys like Hurts or Lamar Jackson. On this particular roster, he brought it back with Travis Etienne. I liked building around this game as well, and this is a unique construction, as a vast majority of the field who played a game stack like this brought it back with either Kirk, Ridley, or Evan Ingram. So Kyren Williams is the next piece, is one off, really sharp. He was my second highest owned overall, and as we discussed all week on the site about his pre-injury role, I really liked exploiting this spot with the potential upside that Kyren has shown at lower ownership than he should be. I also liked playing him solo without a Cardinal. Good leverage off of the Trey McBride chalk this week. Roster also features Isaiah Pacheco and the Chiefs D correlation, which I also liked. Both the Kansas City D and Pacheco were highly owned, but playing them together offers some differentiation, which is important in a 400,000 entrant tournament. Last two pieces from this roster are a mini correlation between Demario Douglas and Jalen Hyatt. I didn't personally get to this game as I didn't like the environment, but these two pieces were both cheap, and with the Darius Slayton news, both were likely to see a decent amount of targets. So I don't mind this play in a large field. I like that you completed the bet of playing them together. And as you see, Jalen Hyatt was only 0.2% owned and put up almost 19 points. I think the only thing about this roster I would have preferred to see a little different was to see you account for the Eagles-Bills game in some way, since it was the highest total and unlikely to completely fail. However, if you aren't rostering any offensive piece, I'd rather see the Philly or Buffalo defense here. But thank you for the submission this week. Overall, a really nice build for that size tournament. The next roster comes from Roal2112, who's an Inner Circle member whose roster we've actually reviewed in this exact same contest in the past. Gotten some submissions from him each week and had a chance to work with him prior to lock to help kind of fine tune his roster. But here's his submission this week in the $50 single entry contest with 5,000 entrants. As you see, it is a Josh Allen double stack with Gabe Davis and Shakir, no bringback. So while I had plenty of rosters that featured Josh Allen and bringbacks, I didn't mind considering no bringbacks this week, because while the Eagles are an extremely concentrated offense, especially with Goddard's injury, all three of their primary weapons, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and DeAndre Swift, were all very expensive. So you're not betting on them failing, just them not putting up a price considered had-to-have-it score. The roster also features Kyren Williams and Trey McBride in a mini correlation. I also think this was a super sharp way to build. As you know, I really like correlation. So if we're going to play a chalk Trey McBride, let's pair him with Kyren Williams to give you some differentiation as well. Roster also features Jaylen Warren as a one-off. So this pains me to see, as many of you in the Discord know, Jaylen Warren was my highest owned player on the entire slate. While it didn't succeed, I personally thought it was a really strong play at 5,400 against the Bengals team that was starting Jake Browning this week. So Final two pieces of this roster are Rashad White and Mike Evans. So Tampa, reasonably concentrated offense, and I don't mind betting on two pieces from the same offense as a player block, kind of hopes of, especially when it's one running back and one wide receiver, kind of the hopes of getting or accounting for all the touchdowns. So the roster didn't feature any skill position players from either the Bills or the Eagles or the Texans and Jaguars, which were two of what I thought were some of the best and more popular game environments. So I do like accounting for not having one of them by playing a DST unit, which you see he played the Texans. So, well, I appreciate the submission this week. Great roster. Next submission came from Inner Circle user Jordan25. This is a $15 3 max in a 3,100 entrant contest. As you see, it is a Bills and Eagles game stack. Jordan led it off with Jalen Hurts with a skinny stack with DeAndre Swift. Kind of again, like we talked about just a second ago, the thought being that you're accounting for all the touchdowns, either with Jalen Hurts rushing or passing, or DeAndre Swift getting rushing touchdowns. And then you aren't rostering an expensive A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. Brought it back with Diggs and Gabe Davis. So personally, I think if you're going to bet on both Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis getting there, especially at their combined $14,000 salaries, you should roster Josh Allen. And why I say that is if Diggs and Davis are putting up the combined 50, 60 points, which is what you're hoping for when you're spending $14,200 in salary, Josh Allen is likely putting up a game that won't hurt you, probably helps you if they're getting those scores. So I think I would prefer the construction that you have here of Jalen Hurts with a skinny stack of Swift had you gone Davis and Shakir instead of Davis and Diggs, just because Davis and Shakir had a combined salary of less than $9,000. So you aren't banking on such a high output where it's much more likely that Josh Allen is the higher scoring quarterback between him or Hurts. From there, the roster features a Kyren Williams mini correlation with Dortch and McBride. I thought it was really sharp to play Dortch and McBride together as a player block. Personally, I did it on several rosters. It was a little bit riskier with the Hollywood Brown and Zach Pascal news with them both being active. But for $8,000 total in salary, 35 combined points was very attainable, especially if Kyren is hitting, which he did. Arizona is likely forced to throw more targets for McBride, more targets for Dortch. So I liked this construction. A final piece on this roster was Pat Freiermuth. Honestly, a great call here on a cheap tight end. Kind of a miss for me this week. I was just personally too invested in Jaylen Warren to get to Freiermuth. I didn't want to invest in two Steelers with their low team total this week, but great call on Freiermuth. Really helped you get to this construction with several expensive pieces like Hurts, Diggs, Williams, and Swift. So great build, and thank you for the submission this week. Next roster comes from Totally Not the FBI. First off, I love your name. A little bummed that you weren't able to get that DK handle. As you see, this is a Gardner Minshew double with both Josh Downs and Michael Pittman. You brought it back with Mike Evans. So not sure how popular this player block was, or this stack was together. I had several builds exactly like it. I thought it was a really sharp way to build around this game. I also had some exposure to Jonathan Taylor with Minshew, with some JT Minshew doubles with either Downs or Pittman. We've talked about on this pod stream in past episodes of how JT and Downs have hit several times already this season. So I did like double stacking Gardner Minshew with 2 out of those 3 pieces. So very sharp start to the roster. However, that's where the correlation ends. So we've spoken about how strong a play Kyren Williams was as a one-off. The same can be said for Derrick Henry facing Carolina, the worst run defense in the league. Likely to be under-owned, or we were projecting him for lower ownership, actually came in higher than expected. But again, a solid one-off. Both of them were 2 of my 3 highest owned running backs, along with, unfortunately, Jaylen Warren. Next piece you had as a one-off was Nico Collins. Really strong play. Wanted to hit on the fact that either Nico Collins or Tank Dell has returned a strong score, which I'm going to classify as 80 yards or more in 7 of the 9 games that they've played together. If we go out and expand that to Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz, kind of in that discussion, one of those Texans pass catchers has put up 26 or more points 9 times already this season. So I do like betting on Texans as one-offs, as well as part of game stacks or mini correlations. But I think any of the Texans wide receivers can be played as one-offs. You also played Jonnu Smith and the Chiefs D as a one-off. So in a vacuum, I think all of these are strong on paper plays. However, personally, I'd like to see more correlation. So maybe instead of Jonnu, you go up to Engram, Evan Engram, to correlate with Nico Collins. And then, obviously you didn't have the salary to go straight to that. So maybe you go down the 800 to Ford or Warren or Ramondre or Najee Harris, et cetera, just kind of give you a little bit more correlation. Or maybe you consider going up to McBride from Jonnu Smith to correlate with Kyren. And then maybe you go down from Nico Collins to Hollywood Brown if you really want to bet on that game environment and go with a Kyren, McBride, Hollywood Brown kind of player block in that mini correlation. We've spoken about this before. It doesn't mean that a roster built this way can't get there. Actually, somewhat frequently in the Millie Maker, we see rosters built this way win. It doesn't mean it can't get there. It doesn't mean it can't win. It's just more things that have to go your way, that have to break right, and just more bets that you have to get right. So for me personally, I kind of will continue to push correlation. Thank you for the submission this week. Totally not the FBI. Next roster we're going to talk through comes from Inner Circle member Sean Hackbar. This is a 3-max, the Hundo contest, so 100 entrants. Built this out with a Stroud double with Tank Dell and Dalton Schultz. So we just spoke about on the last roster how I feel about the Texans in general, Dell, Nico Collins, as well as Dalton Schultz. This is a strong starting stack, and you brought it back with Calvin Ridley. Really like that. Roster also features a mini correlation with DeAndre Swift and Gabe Davis. Both options I liked both. Great way to get exposure to the highest point total game on the slate without betting on either of the high price tags from A.J. Brown or Stephon Diggs. Again, Jaylen Warren as a one-off pains me to see. Again, I thought it was a really strong play. It just didn't work out on this sample size of literally one iteration. We play out this slate 100, 1,000 times. I feel confident that Warren's explosive ability and yet another week of 15-plus opportunities, which he continues to get, would have led to a better outcome. Final piece on this roster is Justin Watson. So I get the logic with McKinnon, Kadarius Toney, and Mecole Hardman all ruled out. However, personally, the merry-go-round of Kansas City pass catchers isn't for me, especially Justin Watson at 22% ownership. I'd rather see you take a shot on Trenton Irwin, to correlate with Warren at basically no ownership with T. Higgins ruled out. We've seen the upside from Justin Watson. However, at 22% ownership, I would rather go with Trenton Irwin as more of a dart throw. We've seen the same ceiling, but I believe that he was 1 or 2% owned. Final piece of this roster is the New York Giants D. I liked this play a lot. They were one of, I want to say 5, maybe 6 defenses I rostered this week across 300 plus rosters. So I really like the opportunity to bet against Mac Jones, especially as you're seeing at 2% ownership. I thought that was a sharp way to differentiate. So thank you for the submission this week, Sean. Next roster comes from OWS member Gunslinger. It is a $12 single entry in the 19,000 entrant contest. As you see, huge Eagles and Bills overstack. This roster features a Josh Allen triple stack with Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, and Kincaid. Brought it back with Swift, A.J. Brown, and old Atlanta Falcon Julio Jones. So, Gunslinger man, I could tell you're a married man because this roster definitely does not have commitment issues with 7 players from the Eagles and Bills game. So, as we discussed kind of all week over the site on how this game had the highest implied team total, yet was under-owned by the field compared to its likelihood to be the highest scoring game on the slate. However, in my opinion, this roster construction is overkill. The main reason for that being the amount of salary that you use. So the 7 players, Allen, Davis, Shakir, Kincaid, Swift, A.J. Brown, and Julio, cost over $41,000 in salary. And thus, you need 165 points to keep you on that 200-point pace, which is roughly 24 points a player. So while Josh Allen and A.J. Brown had eclipsed 24 points several times this season, DeAndre Swift and Gabe Davis have only done it once. And Kincaid, Shakir, and Julio have yet to do it all season. So to me, this kind of seemed like kind of a hefty ask. So in concept, I like the idea of an overstack, especially in the highest game. I just personally think I'd limit it to 5 total players, especially when they are expensive options. Warren and Chiefs D on this roster, again, both strong one-offs in good on-paper spots. Again, the Chiefs were my highest owned defense this week, just didn't pan out. Gunslinger, I know you're a super sharp player. I have seen you at the top of leaderboards, sometimes in the same week as me. I just personally think on a roster that we're betting on a game like this, I would be more conscious of salary. But thank you for the submission this week. The next roster comes from OWS subscriber Leadright. This is a 2,000 entrants 3-max contest built with a CJ Stroud double stack with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. We've already heard me sing the praises of this build, including Tank Dell and Nico Collins and the upside they provide. So I love this start. It's got a nice mini correlation with Derrick Henry and Mingo. So personally, I played 6% Mingo, 4% DJ Chark, along with some Adam Thielen. Almost all were in correlations with Derrick Henry. I think for this example, Mingo and Chark, but Mingo had multiple games with 7 or more targets. And at 3,300, I thought very reasonably had upside to go for 18 to 20 points, a 6 for 60 and a touchdown if things broke his way. If Derrick Henry's putting up a game where he's scoring, multiple touchdowns, likely forcing Carolina to throw more, and Mingo has continued to be on the field 90 some odd % of the snaps every week and seeing targets. So I liked going with Mingo here taking a chance at less than 1% ownership. The roster then has DeAndre Swift as a one-off, as well as George Pickens, Trey McBride, and the Chiefs D. So personally, on this build, I'd like to see a little bit more, maybe one more mini correlation. So maybe we get off Pickens or McBride and go up to either Gabe Davis or Dalton Kincaid to correlate with Swift. And then if I did that, I'd probably go down to either Evan Ingram or Zay Jones with either Pickens or McBride, depending on which you went with, either Davis or Kincaid, to go down to either Ingram or Zay Jones to be part of your bring back with Stroud double. Again, you don't have to have a bring back. I personally just like it. It's just less things that you have to get right. Especially, I do like bring backs in close projected games that are projected to be high scoring. So appreciate the submission this week, Leadright. So the next roster comes from OWS subscriber Solo. This is a $100 single entry with 4,400 entrants. It is a Josh Allen double with Davis and Shakir. No bring back. We discussed earlier how I thought this was a sharp stance due to the Eagles' salaries. Again, you certainly could roster an Eagle, but I didn't feel like you had to in order for Josh Allen doubles to get there. Kyron Williams and McBride as part of a mini correlation. Really like that. The roster also has Nico Collins and Christian Kirk as a mini correlation. I really like that. And Derrick Henry as the only one-off. Again, we've spoken about really strong piece. Finally, Broncos D at home instead of a chalk Chiefs D. Also really like that. Broncos D was my second highest owned. So really great build, Solo. I'm really happy for you to get this win. I know it's been a long time coming. I have really enjoyed reading your weekly reflections the past year in the Reflections channel. I think it is a space that is really important for growth as DFS players, and one that Inner Circle players and subscribers should utilize more. So excellent roster, Solo. Thank you for the submission, and really excited for you this week. Final roster is actually one of mine. I had plenty of Josh Allen stacks. He was my highest owned quarterback. However, I wanted to show something other than a CJ Stroud or Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, or Gardner Minshew roster. And along with those four, Kyler Murray was the only other QB in my player pool this week. I got a ton of submissions this week. I think 35 or so submissions. However, just for how high we were as a site on Josh Allen and CJ Stroud, Jalen Hurts, etc., that is basically every roster I got this week. So wanted to include a Kyler Murray double stack, just so that you could see another way to build. Wasn't my highest scoring roster of the week. Did have plenty of 200-point rosters. Funny enough, my highest scoring roster, I think only scored 205, but actually took a 0 from Jonnu Smith. So in a week where 220 won the Millie Maker, just what could have been with 205 with a 0. So I digress. So this roster, $12 single entry, 19,600 entrants. It's a Kyler Murray double stack with Dortch and McBride. Brought it back with Kyron Williams. As I've spoken about earlier on this stream, I really like that as a player block. Roster then has Gabe Davis and Devontae Smith as a mini correlation from the highest point total game on the slate. One-offs, Isaiah Pacheco, Nico Collins. We've spoken about them already on the stream. as well as the New York Giants D, who again came in at low ownership, just 3% in this contest. So I think that is a good transition to kind of speak about how hard it is to win. I saw tons of OWS winners this week, and really happy for you. Several folks, though, in the Discord who are ready for it to be their time to win. So I wanted to just kind of take a quick second to speak to the roster here from Solo and talk about this tournament that is a 4,000 entrant single entry tournament, which means that if you play in it every week of the season, including the playoffs, that's only 20 attempts, 20 rosters all year. So let's say in a hypothetical situation that you are the best player in the world and you are 10 times better than the field. The math on that would still mean that you should only expect to win this tournament once every 20 years. Even if we include second place, and again, this is hypothetically that you are 10 times better than the field, it's still only coming in first or second place once every 10 years. So I'd say that to emphasize. And again, this isn't the Millie Maker. This is a 4,000 entrant field. It's just so hard to win a tournament, and so many things need to break your way. So continue to stay focused and try not to get discouraged. I also got several questions this week in DM about MME. And as you saw, I did include a roster from the Play Action, which is a 400,000 entrant contest, as well as a Millie Maker roster, which is a 200,000 entrant contest. And I think one of the key concepts that I wanted to quickly reiterate is the importance of establishing a core. And so for clarity and just to be transparent, so this is my main rosters here from the Bink Machine in week 12. I didn't quite submit 388, but I was close. It was like about 350 this week, and these were my biggest bets this week. Kind of most focusing, let's say, on the running back position. I had really big stands on Jaylen Warren, Kyren Williams, and Derrick Henry. Here, you kind of get to see my most common stacks all around either Josh Allen, Stroud, Hurts, or Gardner Minshew. This was just the most common just because of how few options I was playing on the Colts. But again, you can't win every week. So FOMO is real. So even if you're entering 150 or 200 rosters, I really feel like my advice is that you really need to try to work on refining a core. Pick your lane and go 100 miles an hour. You're not going to win every week, but when you're right, you're going to give yourself a lot of chances to kind of skyrocket up the board. So I think my advice, even if you're only building 25, 30, 50 rosters, is to establish a core. Let's say that core is 3 or 4 quarterbacks, 4 or 5 running backs, 5 or 6 wide receivers, 3 or 4 tight ends, and I would commit to that group of players 25 to 30% exposure. You're obviously going to play more than 5 or 6 total wide receivers across your portfolio, across your rosters. But personally, I like saying, hey, I'm going to commit to 30% exposure on 5 or 6 of them. 3 or 4 running backs. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to have 30% exposure. Personally, that's how I like to do it. Just so that if you're right, let's say with those 3 running backs, let's say that 2 of them are really strong plays. From my pool, that's Kyren Williams and Derrick Henry. Maybe those are really strong plays this week. You're going to have a bunch of rosters that have those 2 on it. And of your 5 wide receivers, maybe you get 3 or 4 that do really well. You're going to have a bunch of rosters that have those combinations on them and will give you the most chances to get the right combination. So again, you can't win every week, and your expectation should be that you are probably going to lose. So play fearlessly, play for first place. And if you don't know what I mean by playing for first place, please go to the courses in the education section on oneweekseason.com and read through the playing for first or the main build shows or content there. Because OWS may stand for 1 week season, but to me, it stands for 1 week can make a season. So keep playing fearlessly. Don't get discouraged. And I hope to see you and your OWS pennant at the top of a leaderboard this upcoming week. Thanks for tuning in and look forward to talking to you next week. Bye.